Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consul, your host. In addition to being the host of this podcast and interviewing novelists, I am a novelist myself. I have 3 published novels. My latest is titled Lolita Firestone, a supernatural novel, and it is set in Sedona, Arizona and Cairo, Egypt. My previous novel is titled Family Recipes, a novel about Italian culture, Catholic guilt, and the culinary crime of the century. And my first novel is named Hardwood, a novel about college basketball and other games young men play. And that story deals with issues ranging from depression and racism to sex, religion, and university politics. All 3 novels are listed in the episode notes. I hope you will buy them, I hope you will read them, and I hope you will thoroughly enjoy them. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is Dorothea Benton Frank, author of the novel My Magnolia Summer. It's out now. It's a summer read. I invite you to get a copy. Dorothea Benton Frank was born in New York City. She was raised in Montclair, New Jersey. And this is my part of the world, having grown up in upstate New York. But she considers herself to be a dual resident, including over in Lowcountry. Think South Carolina, think Pat Conroy, and other novelists who have documented the people and lifestyle in the region. Think Dorothea Benton Frank as well. She's a graduate of the College of Charleston. I've been to the campus. It's a beautiful campus. And if you've never been to Charleston, South Carolina, it is one of the truly beautiful American cities. I've been there several times. It's just a fantastic place. And the antebellum mansions and so on, it's incredible. So she lives just outside of Charleston, is my understanding. And she's not only a graduate of College of Charleston, also the French Culinary Institute. And she worked in the restaurants of New York City before returning to Charleston, which she considers her real home. She lives there with her husband, her 2 kids, and a dog, a giant mutt of a dog, according to her. And when she's not writing, she's reading, cooking, and chasing her children around the house. That sounds like a pretty idyllic lifestyle right there. And dare I say, she is the daughter of novelist Dorothea Benton Frank, who produced about 10 novels. So with that, Dorothea Benton Frank, thank you for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Such an honor.
It's an honor to have you. So my understanding is, I mentioned your mom, and you probably, at some point, you must get tired of hearing about your mom because you 2 are kind of attached at the hip. I know you love your mom and all that. My understanding is that you actually work with the same agent, publisher, and editor as your mom did. So I assume these are people who did right by your mom and for that reason earned your trust and are doing good work for you. Is that okay? So it is true, same agent, publisher, and editor?
Yes, it's the same agent, publisher, and editor. And my mom actually did 20 novels, not 10, which is
20.
Crazy.
Wow.
Yes. And we wrote a book together. And I am actually pretty open and excited always to talk about my mother. I never get sick of talking about her. She was my best friend. She was my soulmate. And she's the reason why I'm able to do what I'm doing. So I think in a lot of ways, I'm carrying on her legacy. And so just like mother comes from daughter, so do these stories. And so that's not off limits for me. If you want to talk about I never get sick of it. I love her. It keeps her alive.
So you don't feel like you're living in your mom's shadow in any way?
Not at all. I think I'm carrying on her light.
Now, and one of the reasons I say that is, I've seen your mom on YouTube. She's got a big personality, as do you. You 2 are similar in that way. I think you're talkative, friendly, big personality. So let me ask you, in what ways are you like your mom other than that? What are some of the similarities between you and your mom's personalities?
Oh, God, I think so many. I think I'm almost a 50-50 of my mom and my dad. But for everyone who's paying attention now, we can talk about my mom and my similarities.
Or maybe it's easier to say in what ways you differ. How are you and your mom different? Because you're probably similar in more ways than you're different.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the older I get, the more I see differences. Just the way we approach life is a little bit different. I am a lot more calculated, I think, than she is. And I'm a lot more defensive. Like I'm much more careful about my privacy than she was. She was a very, very open book. Like I tend to be a little bit more introverted than she was. but not by much. I mean, we both huge personalities, great sense of humor. We're straight shooters. We value honesty. We love clothes and accessories, and we're big clothes horses. Style is a big deal. We both love to cook. I can sing, she couldn't, so that was always a point of contention. But other than that, we were a lot alike. I mean, I think maybe I'm a little moodier than she is. I'm a little darker. Certainly my writing style is a little sexier than hers was. She was a little bit more on the, she's like PG-13.
Victorian, a little more Victorian side.
Yeah, she's PG-13, I'm R-rated. You know what I mean? Like, that's just who we are. But I think that's also generational in a way. Like,
sure,
if you write romantic, intimate scenes for a target audience of 65-year-old plus, it's going to be a lot lighter than if you're writing it for my age range. Because look at Emily Henry, who writes these, or Fourth Wing that just came out. Rebecca Yarros, I think her last name is. I could be wrong on that, but it's full of sex, and people get very sort of jarred about that, who are in the older community typically. However, in my experience on tour that I went this summer, it was all the little old ladies that were like, please bring us more sex.
Yes. People like to live vicariously. I mean, why do you read fiction? You do it because you want to live vicariously through the characters. And one of the things about writing that I've heard novelists say is that you get to live a lot of different lives through your writing. You embody these characters. So in that way, and then the readers. Oh, go ahead with that. What were you saying?
No, I was an actress first. That was my first. Well, I was a dancer first, so I've always been a storyteller. And I think what drew me to the acting performing route was that I really loved that I could be anyone. And this way, not only do I get to create people, I get to be in their head. I get to learn about a lot of different lifestyles. I'm writing about a photographer now. I don't know how to take pictures, not really well, so it's a whole different headspace that I'm jumping into. It's really cool. It's probably my favorite part. I get to live a few lives.
Now, you started writing while your mom was still alive. And your mom died young. First of all, she was only 67, which was very young by today's standards, especially for a woman. And she was encouraging you, maybe even bullying you to write in a good way.
She was,
Did you start writing while your mom was still alive, or was it after her death that you started writing?
While she was still alive. So she got to see about 150 pages of my novel. Did
she feel like there was a little too much sexual content, or was she comfortable with it?
No,
not at all.
But she was like, you've got to be careful because you make these choices about who your audience is going to be, and so if you're going to write those scenes, or you're going to use certain language, or you're going to talk about certain political things, you have to decide what you're going to make, sugarcoat, and what you're going to get gritty about, so I think there was a conversation about that, but it was never like, don't write this. It was more like, you just do it in the vein. So my mom's primary rule of writing was to write a book you would want to read. And that is a good piece of advice for a ton of reasons, but I think the biggest reason is that you're shaping an audience because you write essentially for yourself anyway, because especially your first novel, because you don't know if it's ever going to go anywhere, so it's for your own enjoyment in the beginning. And hopefully
you want, how are you going to enjoy the work or love the work if it's not really for you? And then I think you put it out there. And the ultimate test is you put it out to the market and see if anybody salutes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
that worked with you. That worked with you. You're writing what you want to write, and you've attracted an audience.
Yeah, and I want to write a book I'd want to read myself. And I think that's what drew me to this particular book that I'd finished. But my second novel, I'm certainly approaching it with much more of an awareness of an audience. And what my audience wants to hear. And I've gotten a lot of great constructive feedback from a community of readers that has been really great. And I think I understand who's reading my book better now.
That's what I wanted to ask you about that. How much you know about your audience? And this is a new audience because this is your first novel. You have another one in the works.
Yeah.
You're going out. You've gone out and done the book tour thing. Have you not?
Yeah, I did a huge tour.
So what did you tell me about your audience? What
the people who actually show up, obviously those are your most dedicated people.
Yeah.
So what did you find? What are the demographics of your audience, and what kind of material did they provide you with? What did they tell you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I could write a book just on book tour, probably. It was so, I learned so much about the industry, not just from my readership, but also from the booksellers. What works as, I think 20 years ago to be a writer was much more solitary. And now as a writer, you're almost a brand. And so I am very accessible through my social media platforms. So I'm very involved with my readership anyway. I've developed real life friendships through that, which has been crazy. I think initially I thought it would be mostly super fans of my mom and that most of the audience would be them. And it was in the beginning. But once I was like 2 or 3 weeks into it, I all of a sudden it was about 50-50. It was people who picked up my book and were like, oh, this is a fun book, or they read it and they were like, oh my God, this is what I've wanted. And so they come and they want to learn about, how I came to be a writer and what drew me to the stories, and how I switched in my life from being a professional chef to a writer. And so I think a lot of different things attracted them to me as far as like coming to my events. But I learned that women really resonate with coming of age stories. And when I say coming of age, I mean like rising to the occasion, because a lot of times in life, and I'm sure this happens with men too, but we're called to rise. It can be when you become a mother. It can be when you become a wife. It could be when you become your own person, start your own business. And so these sort of rising to your purpose stories.
Well, and there's a paths not taken. And I think maybe men relate a little more to that. I do. I think back on the paths that I didn't take in life. And if I can take that path through reading fiction, it's living vicariously through that. And I think people underestimate just how much, when it happens in the everything happens in the mind. So even if you're not there, even if you haven't lived it, but you're reading it, you're living it through your own mental faculties. And that's as real as anything.
Absolutely.
And I think people underestimate that. Let me ask you, what's your favorite or most effective social media platform?
Instagram.
That's an
I'm not surprised. Answer. Instagram is definitely my favorite. And I think I like it because of the jokes. Like I like to go on there and laugh and watch silly videos and spread that, I think it's great to have that joy. And I also like that I can share pictures and I can have personal messages and conversations with them. But I want
it's a more versatile platform than TikTok.
It is. Yeah. No, I hate TikTok. I don't understand it. I can't do it.
It's video only, really.
I know. And everyone's telling me to get on it. I'm like a little too old for TikTok, I feel like. But anyway, I'm like right in that middle. But I did want to say something else about what we were talking about a second ago. I think also what I learned on book tour, which is important, is that people really love the South. They like just romanticize the shit out of it. Like everybody, like everybody wants to be Southern. Everybody wants to know about like multi-generational families in the South, steel magnolias, yaya sisterhood, like all those great female stories. We love that. And we love because the South preserves legacy and tradition like nowhere else on earth.
Yeah. And it's a place where family still matters.
Yes.
In a good way and a bad way, mostly a good way, because families stay bonded. They understand the power of family. But then there's also the aspect of it that, who's your family? What's your last name? Who's your family? And nobody wants to get excluded because they don't have a bright lights family legacy. But on the other hand, that tradition, maintaining that tradition. Now you obviously, you do because of your mom and probably her mom before that. Talk about. Go ahead.
So my mom, but she's a very self-made woman. My family has been in the South. Of course, we take pride about our family and my ancestors and all that, but they weren't super accomplished people like my mother was. She was really the first of her family to like set out and make a huge name for herself, certainly on, international scale. Like she wasn't, I mean, there were people here who were famous for whatever they did. Like my great grandmother started the Magic Lantern, which is the book in my restaurant, was a real restaurant. And they were the first restaurant to have a soda fountain. So like, there's a lot of like little things like that. Great accomplishments, but not like massive, well-known accomplishments, I guess is the better way to put it. Not a lot of people were college educated. Not a lot of people had super like affluent families. I mean, not from a lot of money, struggling, definitely, on both sides of my family. So both of my parents are self-made people, that never had a legacy to lean into. I have that luxury, which is incredible. And it is a gift, and it's certainly a privilege. So I don't really have, I do have that platform, but I tell everybody, because of course, when you're interviewing or talking to somebody who is taking on the family business, people are like, oh, she's riding on the coattails. There's always going to be negativity like that. Mm-hmm. But I tell everybody this, my mom opened doors for me. I had to walk through them myself. Mm-hmm. Like I still had to write that book. Ain't nobody write that book for me, so there's
a million titles a year published in the United States. I mean, yes. Literally, yes. The idea that somebody's going to read something because you got you had a family name or connection or some doors open for you is ridiculous. People are going to read what inspires them or what engages them or what warms their heart.
That's right.
Which brings us to My Magnolia Summer, your debut novel. Tell us about it. Tell us what you can about it without giving any suspense. Well, maybe creating suspense, but not giving any denouement away.
Oh, my little elevator pitch. Okay. So My Magnolia Summer is a story about a girl named Maggie, who's Magnolia, but she goes by Maggie. And it is a multi-generational coming of age story set in the South of the Lowcountry of South Carolina. She is raised primarily by her grandmother, Rose. All the women in the book are named after flowers. And she inherits a restaurant that's been in her family for 3 generations. And so she's a struggling chef in New York. Her grand gets in an accident. She has to come back to Sullivan's Island to help with the family restaurant, and she finds it in disarray. It's not only the restaurant that's suffering, her mother is, her sister is, everyone's sort of falling apart. And so Maggie has a choice. She can stay in South Carolina and fix, or she can go back to New York and chase her dreams. Of course, the question is, can you reach your dreams in your own backyard? And there's a love story attached, and there's several love stories attached. And there's a lot of good humor. It's light, it's funny. It does deal with some dark issues, but at the end of the day, when you're done with the book, you're in a good mood.
Well, and you hit the big 3 right there. Food, sex, and laughter.
There you go.
Yes, I mean that's
you don't have that in a book or life. Like kill yourself, right? I mean, like you got to have all those things in life and in a book.
Those are the 3 things everybody wants in their life. They want food, sex, and they want laughter. And that's pretty complete right there.
Yes, yes, for sure.
So this was your first novel. What was the hardest part about writing? Because writing is not easy. I think a lot of people sit down to write and they realize, wow, every word is a decision that you've got to make. It's difficult.
Oh my God, yes.
And it doesn't come out whole. It doesn't come out a whole cloth. You have to. It's a mosaic that you have to piece together and stitch together and so on. So what did you find to be the hardest part? What was the experience like?
I think the hardest part was finishing it for me. It wasn't starting it or writing it. I could go on forever. I run my mouth on the page and also in life. But I think writing is sort of like cooking in a way that everyone thinks that because they can cook, they can open a restaurant, which is why it's the biggest failing industry. And I think the same thing goes for writing a book. I think so many people are like, oh, I'm going to write a book. And then they sit down and they can't get past like maybe a chapter, if that. Like I was talking to my girlfriend the other day and I was like, oh my God, like, do you remember when we were in college and we had to write a 3-page essay and like, it took us forever. I have to do that every freaking day now. I'm like tortured. It's tough. It is tough. But I think the hardest part for me was wrapping it up. I wrote 750 pages, which is insane. And my brilliant editor was like, this is stupid. No one wants to take an encyclopedia to the book. So she cut it in half and we wrote the ending of it in like 2 weeks. So we cleaved it and then sewed it back together. So it was a lot of intense editing that went on, but I think knowing where to end it was the hardest part for me.
Well, just in terms of the length of the book, William Burroughs, I just heard this quote the other day. William Burroughs said that if I write a 200-page book, assume it was 600 words, or I'm sorry, I guess it was. I guess he was just making the point on the ratio, 200-word book, assume it was 600. In other words, you're always going to write, if you're writing correctly, you're going to write a lot more copy than you actually end up with the finished product. Because if you're not, you just need to produce the raw material. And there's always the saying that writing is rewriting. And that's such a big part of it. In fact, that first rewrite, I almost feel like isn't even rewriting, it's writing, but you've got to have 100%. That raw material. And the only way it really works well is if you produce a lot of it and then you find the gems in there.
Well, I always say that you can't clean up a blank page. So you got to put something down, and I think right now I'm working on the first draft of my second novel. And a lot of it is just pushing it out. It's just, I even have sentences in there that's like, enter, detail here, because I don't want to take the time away from the dialogue or the pace of my writing. I can always go back and enter historical fact or, a certain scene or a conversation. And I put those things in my novel in red. So I know that I have to go back to those pages later when I have the time. And that's what the rewriting is. Dirty drafts are important and they don't have to be perfect. And I think once you take the pressure off of yourself of, like you said, every word has to be a decision, you can make those decisions later. And I find that as you're writing and you're like, I'm writing garbage today, I'm just going to put it down on the page. Sometimes that's where the gems come out because you have no pressure.
Because you're taking the filters away. The filters away. And if you're going to censor yourself while you're writing, you're that's probably what makes you kind of natural for the writing process, is that you don't necessarily have a lot of filters. You let it flow, and then you make the post-writing decisions when you narrow it down to it's a little bit like, well, actually a lot like cooking. I say this a lot. Actually, that you produce a lot of copy, then you go to the distillation process. It's almost a reductionism. That's what you do with cooking, especially probably French cooking, which you're expert at. Is that you want this rich, reduced broth to as a finished product, not the big cauldron of weak broth. You want to boil it down to where it's, this is strong.
And I think another really interesting, this makes me think of Ellen Hildebrand is a big inspiration for me. I did an event with her. She was friends with my mom. She endorsed my book, so generous. We're becoming friends on our own. But she is absolutely someone I look up to and admire. Her last book, The 5-Star Weekend, it was a great story. It read really quick. From a reader's perspective, I love it. But from a writer's perspective, it had no fat on it at all. Like, it was the tightest writing I've read in a long time. Like,
That's the 5-Star Weekend.
Yeah, the 5-star.
You're the second person in 3 podcasts who had brought Ellen up. So she's a valued writer.
Oh yeah, and I think she gave me the best piece of advice I've ever got, besides from my mother, that I've ever gotten from another writer has been from her. She said, I may not be the best writer in the room, although I think she might be. But she said, I went to the Iowa workshop, everyone around me was these amazing literary writers. And I came in and I was writing commercial things. And she's like, you know what? The difference between me and the other people, I get it done. I turn it in. And I was like, you know what? That's like really helpful, because if you want to get paid, you got to turn in a manuscript, and you can't be a writer unless you write. So there's like a little bit of that. There's a little bit of to sit on your butt, glue yourself to your computer and turn in the work. Like, just do it.
And it's a form of procrastination when people continue to dawdle with their work. Because, the fact of the matter is, I'm sure when you go back and you read my Magnolia Summer, you see that I could have made this change or that change. I could have pissed around with this thing for another 5 years, but at some point you just get it out there, and
you got to let it go.
A lot of those changes are not necessarily for the better. I mean, you have to trust your instincts and you go with it.
You can over edit for sure.
Yes.
You can absolutely over edit, just like you can over sharpen a pencil, right? You over sharpen too much, it breaks. It's the same thing with creative process. You build it, you walk away from it, you come back to it, you do a little editing, then you walk away from. You got to have that space between you and your project too. Like, I really believe in that. Like, if I have a moment, which I do all the time, and I call myself kamikaze writing, because it's like, I sit down, I write like 3 pages, and then I get up and I can't write for 4 days. Like, I don't know why, so I catch it when I can. I also have 2 small children and a husband who's very demanding. So I have
you don't have necessarily a regimen that's
well, I do. I just don't always follow it. Like, I sit
because you get these disruptions.
Yeah. And also just my damn mind, like sometimes I just can't do it. Like, it is definitely, I do have a regimen. I get up at, same time every day, get my kids to school, breakfast, clean them up, come back in, have breakfast myself, answer some emails. 10:30, I'm at my desk to work, and I focus work until 3:00. Between those hours though, it's not always writing. Sometimes it's research. Sometimes it's reading other material, to sort of jog my creative juices. Sometimes it's reading something that I've written before. Sometimes it's just being a mom and doing administrative emails and crap that you have to do, paying bills and whatever, but I'm at my desk for those hours. But it doesn't always,
it doesn't always flow. It doesn't always, never does for everybody. And you don't necessarily force it. It sounds like what you're saying is if I'm just not going to be productive that day, I don't waste my time. I might get some other things done and get back to the writing 4 days later.
Yeah. And I don't really have the luxury for 3 or 4 days anymore because,
you have deadlines.
Right. I have deadlines. But the other thing is, like, this is actually a creative process. Like, yes, it's more regimented than, say, dancing, but like, I got to produce. Because I have to get paid. So, but at the same time, if the muse isn't there, she's not there and I'm not writing. Like,
right.
And if I feel her come on and I'm doing something else, I stop what I'm doing to catch it, because I truly believe that when I sit down at my desk, it's like being at an altar. I conjure the muse I invite her in, and I start writing, right? Whatever I say, I'm personalizing her now, but it's the feeling, it's the God, it's the universe, it's the creativity, whatever you want to call it.
You're channeling the Holy Spirit, you're channeling your mom, you're channeling the higher power, whatever label you want to use for God.
My talent, something
beyond
mom.
yourself. Something beyond yourself.
And if I'm driving a car and I get a good idea, holy shit, I'm going to pull over and I'm going to write it down. Like, that's what's going to happen, because I'm going to lose it otherwise. And I need to hold on to those things. There is a level of mania that happens with writing. And I think the further you get into it, and the better, I use that word like really liberally here, but like the better you get at it, or the more practiced you become, is probably a better way of saying it. You get more gifts. There's more, at least for me, in my experience. Like, if I learn something, if I get to a part about writing, I'm writing about, there's a little bit of a mystery in my second book, and that's a whole nother genre. So I feel like I've leveled up, that now I feel like I can write a little bit about a historical drama. I can write a little bit about a mystery. I'm ready for other topics because I've passed level 1. I'm at level 2 now. That's book 2 is level 2. My writing has advanced. My ability of holding stories together has advanced. But it's a conjuring. Like, it really is. There is routine, there is structure, there is learning, there is skill honing, but there's also talent. And like any other creative person, you either got it or you don't. It's not a lot of writing is self-taught. Yeah. So you have to kind of pull it out of yourself. There's a lot, it's very solitary, which I'm cool with, because I like being by myself, even though I have so many people in my house.
Well, it's true that some people's minds work in the way that the language works for them, just as math will work for certain people.
Yes.
It's a natural to them. So writing is not for everybody. It does take a certain, I mean, the mind needs to work a certain way. And then there's a stick-to-itiveness that eludes so many people.
For sure.
They just, they just can't sustain it over the course of time that's required. Now, as I said at the top, you went to the College of Charleston. What did you study there?
Oh, theater performance.
Oh, that's right. So you were an
Another
actress back in the
storytelling.
day.
Another way to tell stories. I loved it. And I was really into playwriting, which was sort of my entry into writing novels. It was the dialogue that I really loved. And I loved how bare it was. I loved that there were no descriptions, that it was just talking and character development. I've always been driven by characters in general, like the setting and all of that is important and good. And I'm learning to love that now. But in the beginning, it was really dialogue that got me.
And then you attended the French Culinary Institute. Where is that located? Is that in New York City, or is it?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It's not there anymore. They closed out. They were the French Culinary Institute, and then they were the International Culinary Center, and then they closed down, which was so sad. But
why French? You could have gone to Culinary Institute of America. I mean, there's a lot of places you could have gone. Johnson and Wales. Why the French Culinary Institute? Is that your favorite? Is that your favorite ethnic cuisine?
No, it's not my favorite ethnic cuisine. I like Italian food probably the best. I married an Italian, so it worked out there. But no, French is where you start. I go to the classics. Like when I learned how to write, I read, Dickens and Jane Austen, and I watched.
Why do we start with French cuisine? What is it about French cuisine that's kind of the foundation?
Well, they set the rules. They wrote Escoffier is that book, which is sort of the culinary encyclopedia. And he's French, and all of, the Bocuse d'Or and all those incredible institutions, James Beard Association, all of that, they all started French. That's just the basis. I mean, like, I married into a very Italian family, and they would tell you the Italians invented cooking, but the French are the people who put it to the page. And so that's sort of the standard. And you learn it's structured, and it's very easy to approach things like how to make stocks. That's the first thing you learn in culinary school, knife skills, and all the terminology is in French. I imagine it's like I can compare it to ballet dancing, which is another thing I did for a while. Everything's in French. They put it to page. They made the rules. So you go from that's the standard, and then you learn how to spin off of that.
Interesting. So what is you like Italian food? If you were to, what's your signature dish if you were going to make some Italian? What would be the entree? Do you have one that you have
so
special
hard.
expertise with?
I like to go eat Italian food, but when I cook at home, I cook whatever the heck I'm feeling. I follow a lot of blogs, and I just cook what my kids are going to eat now, which is different. If I'm cooking for my husband, I love to make lasagna. I love to cook with him. Honestly, we do a lot of Asian cooking too at home. But I love a good fried chicken and mac and cheese too. Like that I cook that kind of stuff all the time at home.
Hey, fried green tomatoes. You're a Southerner now, right?
Fried green tomatoes, yes. I make what is the thing that Carmen was like? There's a zuppa toscana, which is this Italian soup that I make that we make probably like once every 2 weeks. It's delicious. It's just with like potatoes and Tuscan kale and sausage, and it's a brothy soup, and it always seems to be the perfect thing. But we do a lot of, I cook everything. I cook whatever the heck I'm feeling. I'm inspired, kind of like my reading and my music choices. It's very diverse. It's whatever's going on in my head, I'll cook.
Talk about
Tonight I'm cooking a Southern Living recipe, which is a chicken ranch pasta casserole for the kids. So it's like, you could get something very high end over here, or you could wind up with dino nuggets. You never know.
Well, I'm sure your mac and cheese qualifies as Italian food for your children.
It does for me. It's like the pinnacle of my food pyramid over that and yogurt packets.
What cheese would I love mac and cheese, but I have to, and I love jalapeno mac and cheese. But I will say that mac and cheese, when I order at restaurants, usually disappoints me because the cheese is not flavorful enough. How do you make your mac and cheese?
I do several cheeses. So I do always sharp cheddar, because I think that's like the, be all end all. I put in Gruyere. I do an Italian mix. And if I'm feeling spicy, I'll put in like a pepper jack or something like that. But I have to watch the spice because my kids won't eat it. But if it was left to me, I would do just by myself. It would be jalapenos, bacon fat, and cheddar.
Wow.
Like 3 kinds of cheddar. Yeah, that's how I would make it.
I'm sure you get flavor out of that for sure.
Hell yeah. Put bacon fat in anything. It's delish.
Tell us about your time in New York, working in the New York City restaurant scene, what role did you play? Were you, I don't know if you were a chef or sous chef, and
Oh
where
no,
did you
I never
work?
made it. I never made it that far. I worked, I couldn't. I got my ass kicked. That's the best way to put it. The entire time from the moment I woke up every morning in New York City to when I rested my eyes at the end of the day, it was an ass kicking. It was a total humbling experience. I think I graduated college with this like, hubris and swagger that I had no business having, inflated egos like most fresh college kids do. And then I was very quickly corrected. I went to culinary school, which was fun. I worked at Maria, which is one of the best seafood Italian restaurants, Michael White's in Manhattan. I worked for Danielle Boulud at Bar Boulud. I worked for Emma Hurst at Sorella in the Lower East Side. So I had 3 different experiences. I had a big Italian, classic French, and I had a small Italian spot that I worked for, which was run by an American woman. But then I went and I worked with my husband, he was my boyfriend then, and his parents' Italian pizzeria in Connecticut, which was a totally different experience. So, and then I wound up teaching culinary classes in Charleston. So I did a lot of different things. My favorite was teaching. And I always felt in the back of the mind, those that can't teach, because I felt like that's who I was. Like I couldn't make it as a chef. I loved it. I was good at it, but I wasn't great at it. And what I wasn't great at wasn't the cooking part. I was great at that. The thing I wasn't good at was the physical demands, the time, the sacrifice that required. I wasn't willing to do that. I never saw anybody I loved. I was in a dark basement all the time. I worked when everybody else played. It was really tough.
Yeah.
It was depressing. And I was broke. I mean, like I was working 90 hours a week for $8 an hour with no health insurance or overtime. It's crazy in Manhattan. Yeah. I mean, it's just like there's a cover charge to wake up in Manhattan. I was broke. I just couldn't do it. I loved it, but I just couldn't do it. And I think
so you enjoyed the business, but yeah, I mean, you didn't have weekends anymore. You didn't have, you couldn't socialize when everybody else was socializing. On the, I think it's Gay Talese, who I had on the program, said that restaurants are like theater to him. He goes into a restaurant, he gets a gin martini, only one, because he says they're very powerful. He orders up some, just a small dish of food, but he likes to meet people. He likes to see people. He likes to meet them. And I'm sure that your time in, of course, you were kind of locked away when you're in the kitchen. You don't get to meet all the customers, but I would think a restaurant's a great place to meet characters, people who you are going to characterize, people you're going to turn maybe into a composite character. There's a lot of interesting people in restaurants, especially in Manhattan.
I found, for as far as like looking in places for characters, my favorite place to look is in airports. Whenever I travel, I see so much when I'm watching, because I travel alone a lot, especially for tour. I get to see a lot of people and how they respond to stress, how they respond to joy, waiting around thinking no one's watching them. It's a really great place to watch people. Restaurants too. My husband is a chef still, and our like thing we do is we go out to eat, we go to the movies. Those are our 2 favorite things to do. And with children or without, it is our favorite. I mean, my son was in a high chair clipped to the side of like a high-end restaurant when he was like 6 months old. I mean, we're restaurant people. That's just what we do.
Yes. I have to agree with you 100% on, I love airports. I'll go to an airport, 3 hours early. Number one, because I don't like the stress, but but I love waiting for a flight. And I love the people. I'll sit at the bar, just talk to strangers.
Me too.
And I mean, I get it. I totally get it. My wife doesn't like to show up until it's time, but it's like,
and I don't like the stress.
Who wants to? I want to get through. I want to get settled.
Rush. Yeah. Yes. And the other thing that's really cool about restaurants is when you arrive, not restaurants, airports, when you arrive to the gate early, you can watch everybody else arrive. So everybody in a way is making their introduction, and you can tell so much about people in airports, like how they dress, what they hold important. Like my father would be a great case study. Like he always dresses up to travel. He always stands until like when they start boarding, he always stands. He doesn't sit down until the last minute. My husband is the opposite. He'll dress like in his pajamas almost and like wait to the last minute to stand up. Like he's the last one to board the plane. I'm always one of the first. Like it's just that there's personality. I'm sure there's like some sort of like test you could take on BuzzFeed to see like what kind of person you are based on how you act in an airport.
Yes.
But it's true.
It tells you a lot. Well,
Yeah.
how people act under stress or when they're doing something that's fun or maybe not so fun. I mean, if you're people traveling on business, sometimes it's just kind of a slog. But
yeah.
Now your husband's he's a chef. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, tell us about, how did you meet your husband? I know you met him on the job at a pizzeria, it sounds like, in Connecticut at the time.
No, we met in culinary school.
Okay.
Yeah, we went to go work at his parents' restaurant, which was a pizzeria in Connecticut. So we moved in together up there, which was like a whole thing. But then we moved down here because we couldn't do it there. But then they moved here. So
when did you know he was your future husband?
Oh, the moment I kissed him.
Oh, so he's a good kisser. You're a good kisser. He's a good kisser. And then you knew there's going to be intimacy in this engagement here. In this,
it's a great story. It's a great story.
Tell us about it.
Yeah. So he was my friend, and he's much younger than me. I joke and say he's my child bride. But we were really good friends in school, and he was like, let me take you out. And I was like, you are a child? No, like there's no way I'm going to do this. So we were friends for about 6 months. And I had dated a series of obviously idiots that didn't work out. And he was like, I was sad one night, and he's like, let me just take you to the movies. I said, fine, Carmine, I'll go to the movies with you. And we went to the movies, and we stayed out all night. We went to PJ Clark's afterwards and had burgers and like beers. I don't even think we had like wine or anything. I think we're really sober is what I remember. I was like, this is the longest date I've ever been on when like there's almost no alcohol involved. But like we just talked all night, and it was one of those nights that in New York is really magical because it started to snow. And he walked me home, and it was really quiet. Like when you're in New York, it's so loud, there's all this sensory, but when it snows, it's like this blanket of hush just falls on the whole world, and it makes you pay attention to things. And he walked me home, and we were outside my building, and he was like, can I kiss you? And I was like, are you kidding? Of course. And when I opened my eyes, there was snow everywhere. And I was like, this is it. And I knew
wow. Sounds like a New York City love story right there.
It was,
that you've seen on screen, several times. How much younger is your husband?
He's 5 years younger than me. So It doesn't matter now, when you're in your 30s, but when you're in your 20s and someone's 5 years younger, it does matter. So he was like out of high school.
Especially with a guy. A lot of guys don't mature as quickly.
I'm still waiting for him, any day now he'll grow up. No, we've been together 14 years almost, which is a long time. And we have 2 beautiful children. And he's great. I mean, marriage is marriage. It's tough. And certainly when you get involved young, you change a lot within that time frame. And we have gone through a lot of changes. So it's been challenging for sure, but it's beautiful. We have a really good relationship. I'm lucky. I'm very lucky.
Do you think that you write about food and beverage a little bit more than most authors just because of your familiarity with it?
Yeah, and my obsession with it. I mean, I love food. I mean, I cook every day. I cook 2 or 3 meals.
But I'm talking about the writing. So you're obsessed. Okay, so you're and it translates into your writing as well. In other words, I mean, you can't go wrong with food because who doesn't like food? It's extremely rare to, And I always think of food is really intimate. I mean, you put it in your body.
Absolutely.
So you don't do that with just anything. You're very particular about what you're going to put in your body. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people who don't have they don't really play the field in terms of food. They have their favorites and they go back to it over and over again. They'd probably be very monogamous in a marriage, but
that's maybe, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's another, BuzzFeed quiz about that, but I feel like, food is extremely intimate. And also food tells a story. It's a secondary character in my book. I think it'll always be a character in my book. Even my second book, I'm writing about a photographer, but the family has a restaurant. So, it's a sequel to my first book. So it's still involved. And my editor has even told me like, hey, we're not writing about Maggie anymore. Don't write about food. I was like, well, when you're a Southern woman And the food is such a big deal that you would write about food and talk about food in a different way than you would if you were, I think the only other comparison I could say would be like an Italian New Yorker who like totally like Italian American families, like food is a big deal. Southern American families, food is a big deal. We're always cooking, it's always it's
and
just
hosting and
there.
and that's the
Yes,
other aspect of food. It's not just sustenance. Clearly in America, it's certainly not just sustenance. It's recreation. We eat for recreation, but also it's relationships. When you have relationships with people, there's always food involved. You don't just sit there and drink a cup of tea. I mean, people, they want to have a meal. Let's go meet at the restaurant, or I'm going to cook for you, or what have you.
Yeah.
Getting back to the writing aspect, do you think you inherited your writing talent from your mom?
Yes.
So it does, it's aptitudes are often inherited. So your mom pushed you to write, and it took a while before you took that plunge. Why was your mom pushing you to write, and what finally convinced you to do it?
First of all, I'm stubborn. So I should have been listening to my mom a long time ago. If I had, I could have saved myself a lot of heartache. That's for sure. And I think your mom knows you typically, not always, there are obviously exceptions, but nobody knows you like your mother does, so my mom knew that I was a storyteller and I was just trying to find my medium. I started with ballet, then I went to theater, then I went to cooking. So there was always a way that I was telling stories. I even did a stint working as a personal stylist for a while, and clothes tell a story too. So it was just a way to kind of marry it all together. And she sort of dared me to do it finally. And I sat down and I did it just to see if I could. And I loved it. And it just poured out of me. It was waiting there all along. But I also think that I had to live a little bit before I could write. I'm an old soul for sure, but I still felt like I needed to have some experiences outside of my own and meet people and learn before I could before I earned the right, I guess, to write a book. I don't know why I felt that way, but
so you're as we were talking about earlier, you lost your mom. Well, she was still young. She was only 67. And again, that's especially nowadays, that's awfully young to exit the mortal stage. Talk about the experience or the import or the effect your mom's death had on you.
Oh, Jesus. I think, first it was really fast, which for a few years I tried to decide if that was better or worse. And I ultimately landed on it was better off that it was fast. She got diagnosed around the 4th of July and was dead by Labor Day. Wow. She died on Labor Day. Yeah. So it was like 8 weeks, start to finish. And I think that's when I grew up. I was really, 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 really pregnant with my daughter. And it was my second pregnancy. And I just really felt that pregnancy so much more. And I was so afraid the whole time that my grief and my worry would affect the child. So I was very careful, and I learned how to be extremely calculated. I learned how to compartmentalize. I learned how to be really strong. I learned about all this grit. But I think the beautiful thing, even though it's terribly tragic, is that in the end of it, when I was saying goodbye to my mother, I looked at her and I was like, Mom, you've given me everything I need to be who I should be. You gave me that strength. You gave me that grit. You gave me the grace. You gave me the forgiveness. You gave me this ability to love and hold a family together and to lead a family, not only to write and to be a writer and to be good. She's given me everything I need already. It's already inside of me. And that's because of her.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. You gave her permission to leave, really.
Yes, I said, go be with the angels. I mean, I literally, and she squeezed my hand, and then she almost very quickly after that left. But the day I said goodbye to her was the night that she died. And I felt her leave the room. I felt the cord between us fray. The moment I heard her diagnosis, like I knew she was going. And it was really surreal, because she was with me and still is with me all the time. I feel her around me all the time, especially on book tour. Like I had all these crazy experiences where like it was definitely my mom nudging from the other side. So I certainly believe in that. But I think I think there is a passing of the baton that happens with every mother and daughter, or parent and child. I can even say that, but it is specifically in a female connection here. And not only do I get to keep on her legacy as a woman and as a mother, but now I get to do it professionally as well.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
It's truly an honor. It's a privilege.
Yes. Now, does your mom ever come to you in your dreams? I don't know if you even remember your dreams. I'm one of those people who
every single night, every single night. And in every dream, and this is the cruelness, she's alive, and it's been a big misunderstanding.
Well, I don't understand.
So in my dreams,
oddly enough,
in my dreams, she's there and she's embarrassed that she died. And she's like, but I'm actually not dead. You have to let everybody know I'm not dead. And I'm like, Mom, and she wants her jewelry back. Like that. So like, I have to go through the process of, wait, no, I remember your funeral. I planned it. Like, I did all that. I picked out your urn. Like, you're dead. And she's like, I'm not. And then my dad's like, no, chicken, she's not dead. She's actually fine. And I'm like, how are we going to explain this to everybody? Like, and that's the dream. And that in every dream, and it's in a different setting, but it's all been like some misunderstanding that she's actually not dead.
Were you ever competitive with your mother? I mean, when you were growing up, it's natural you were talking about the passing of the torch, but as a girl becomes a woman, sometimes, and you said, by your own admission, you're stubborn or were stubborn, and you and your mom both have these big personalities. I could see to where there's competition for airtime, maybe competition for men's attention, not in the same way, but
no, I know what you mean.
So you never had that kind of relationship with your mom where you went through a few years where it was kind of a competition.
I think competition isn't the right word. I think that my mom and I actually worked together better than anything. So we really complemented each other, especially as I got older. When I hit puberty, I think it freaked her out. She might have been competitive with me. I was never competitive with her, if that makes sense. And I don't mean that to sound arrogant. I think she was just more like, I'm the queen. You know what I mean? And then she was like, wait, we both can be queens. And so she made that shift. And when she made that shift, she was like, I'm raising a queen. I'm raising another alpha female. Yeah. And so when she realized that we weren't against each other, we were learning from each other, and it became this really beautiful partnership. And I think that I do that with my daughter now. Like, my daughter, she's 3.5, but I can tell you something. She is an alpha female. Like, and everyone's like, y'all are going to butt heads. And I'm like, no, we're not. Because I think I'm going to take the friend route. My mom, I mean, we had some rough years. Of course, everybody does, teenagers. And my mom hit menopause when I hit puberty. So that was fun. A lot of estrogen and lack of that flying around the house. But she sort of became the person I would talk to. Like, she was the one I would go to with problems. And there was nothing off limits. Like, if I wanted to talk about an intimate relationship I was having with somebody, she didn't go, you can't have sex. She was like, don't get sick, don't get pregnant, don't get hurt, try to be safe. Like, she was always really more
practical.
Yeah. And I think that
allowed protective.
Yeah, she was protective, but she wasn't protective in a way that was restrictive. She was protective of my heart. And so that was just, and my mind. And then when I got hurt, because everybody does, she helped me put the pieces back together instead of, shaming me or chastising me or punishing me. She gave me a lot of freedom. And I think because of that, I wasn't really a bad kid. I think I had absolutely all the potential to be a huge pain in the ass. I probably was, but I could have gotten in a lot of trouble, and I didn't, because of my, good example is like my mom. I remember going to her and being like, Mom, why do all these people do drugs? And she's like, because they make you feel good, but they'll kill you. And I was like, oh, well, I don't want to die. She's like, right. They'll ruin your life. So don't do it. It's like, all right. I just never did drugs. It just wasn't my thing, because I knew from my parents that it's a bad idea.
Do you think that if your excuse me for interrupting, but do you think that your mom, if she had lived and was still around, do you think you and your mom would have co-authored any books together, or were you do you think it would have been strictly each doing your own work?
No, we had talked about, we wrote that children's book together, Teddy Spaghetti, and that was before she died. And of course it got published the winter right after she passed away, which was very difficult. But We had always talked about, she would write a book, I would write a book, and then we'd write a Christmas book together. That was always the plan. And then eventually we would so my mom had a company called Lowcountry Tales, which I inherited and bought my brother out of it. So it's my company now, and I've rebranded it as New Lowcountry Tales. And so I own all the rights to her books, and then I'm moving forward with mine. So I've just picked it up. It's sort of like I've put it into my basket now, and this is who I am. I'm the ambassador of our brand instead of, and I think that's what the plan was. She would be an ambassador for my brand, and I'd be an ambassador for hers, and we'd be one together, because we are mother and daughter, family oriented people, wholesome imagery with colorful language. This is keeping it real over here, but so I think the plan was always to write a little bit together for sure, and to tour together. We really wanted to tour together, and we never got to do that.
That would have been so much fun for the both of you, I'm sure.
So much fun, because I'm like stand-up comedy, and so is she. So it would have been a blast. We would have and we did go on tour together, but it was for her books. Like, we never went on tour together with my own books. Like, it was always her, because I wasn't published yet. And we had so much fun. Like, every day we'd end an event and be like, can you believe we're getting paid to do this together? Like, what? How did we get away with this? Like, how did we pull this off? And we had a blast. She's the best.
Do you, you were born and raised in New York City, is that right?
Yes. I was raised in New Jersey, but
that's right, Montclair, New Jersey. So more of an urban, New York City anyway. But why is Lowcountry, Charleston, South Carolina? Why do you feel that that's home? What are the characteristics and the lifestyle there? What makes you say that's my real home?
Well, a couple reasons. I think the biggest way to answer that is that I believe that space has memory, and my family on my mother's side has been in the Lowcountry for over 300 years. So when I came here for college, and when I came here in the summers to visit family, I always felt like this was home, and I was just away from home. And I never really fit in with people in my childhood. I never fit in. I mean, I had friends. I had tons of friends. I was a cheerleader. I was, did all the dance and company and all that shit. Doesn't matter at all. But I had friends, and I had lots of boyfriends and all that stuff, but I never felt like it was real. I always felt like I was like playing pretend or something. And then I came here, and I was so connected to the land. It was this pulling that happened to me, and I missed it. So I came here for college, and then I moved back to New York to be a chef, and I missed the Lowcountry desperately. Like, it was like I was sick for it. And the plan was always to get everybody to move here. So that was, I made it, and my dad made it, but my mom never made it back all the way.
Well, having grown up in the Northeast and having lived in the Southeast for a while, the mentality is totally different. Northeasterners are very aggressive, and it's a really different mentality. I mean, it suits me well, but when you go to the South, it's a very different atmosphere. It definitely is a different sort of lifestyle. Pardon me?
I think on the surface, I think, the longer I live here, the more I see a lot of, first of all, Charleston is changing a lot. We're so much more urban. We have so many more Yankees that have moved here, is what we like to call them, and immigrants that have come here from different parts of the country, and sometimes internationally. And it's affecting us, and how we move. The new South, the new Lowcountry is a different identity than it was even 10 years ago. So yes, New Yorkers are more aggressive on the surface, but Southerners are more aggressive on the inside. Like
you don't want to listen to a Southerner say, bless your heart, because that's the dagger, right?
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Telling you to go fuck yourself. Right to your face. I don't know. I mean, I miss a little bit of the straight shooting that happened in New York. Like, I always tell everybody I work with, everyone who works for me, who I work for, please just tell me the truth. Don't worry about hurting my feelings. It'll piss me off if I find out you're lying to me. Don't do that. Just tell me, does this work suck? Did I disappoint you? Am I not enough? Tell me. Don't make me find out later. It's going to hurt me. So like, just honesty, always tell the truth in your writing, who you are, and to yourself. So important.
So before we wrap things up, tell us something that we would be surprised to know about you. You're such an open book. There's probably nothing that would surprise us, right? Because you lay it all
I
out
don't
there.
have I don't have a big trust fund. Everyone seems to think I'm like rolling in money for some really ridiculous reason. I don't have that. Unfortunately, I was an idiot and rejected all of that. I was like, that's not the life for me. I don't know. What would you be surprised to know? I am an open book. So if someone wanted to know something, I would just tell them, I don't think I really hide. I think people are surprised to find out that I'm really a very avid reader. I think in the beginning that just surprised them of how much of a nerd I am. I mean, I really like my ideal night is drinking a whole bottle of red wine, doing a jigsaw puzzle and listening to an audiobook. Like that's what I want to do. I'm very introverted and a lot of people don't think that of me because I don't present myself that way when I'm on, but when I'm off, like no makeup, no fun clothes. I'm by myself, I'm reading a book or I'm with my kids, Yeah, I think I'm very private. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, not so private. Actually, this has been a great. My guest has been Dorothea Benton Frank, the novel, her debut novel, My Magnolia Summer. I can't let you go though without asking about your next one. What you would tell us what you can about the next one.
So it's hard to talk about the next one because it is a complete lift off of the first one, but it is the sister story. It's about, again, rising to the occasion and settling into new roles. It has a little bit of a mystery in it, and it has a huge love story. So it's dreamy. It's a little darker than the first book. It's a little sadder, but the ending is triumphant. And it's still on the Lowcountry and still talks about food, and we still talk about family, and there's a dog in it. So it's good.
Authors are always accused of being autobiographical. How much of My Magnolia Summer in your next novel are autobiographical? If you were to apply a percentage to it, would you? Do you even accept that premise? And if so, what would the percentage be?
I think every single character you write is a version of yourself in one way or the other. I think their first book is very autobiographical. I would say probably 80%. However, the relationships are fictional completely. Like I had a great relationship with my mom. Maggie and Lily hate each other. I never knew my grandmother's really. She was raised by her grandmother. So I never had a sister. She is a sister. So I played with opposites as far as that goes. But conversations that I have or feelings that I have or how I would react or the opposite of how I would react. And, the nice thing about writing is you get the bathroom mirror conversation. You can say what you want in the moment. You're a lot more like witty and you say the right thing. You can tell someone to fuck off in a really creative way on the paper, but you can't really do that in life. So
right.
Maggie and Violet, I think Violet is probably more like me now. And Maggie was like me 10 years ago. So, we're all a continuation. It's all my characters are me. I'm a crazy person. I have like 20,000 people living in my head,
Victoria, thank you so much for coming on the program and sharing yourself with us.
Thanks for having me. Thank you. This was fun.